Let's acknowledge the good friends of the Loft Party Podcast. The Majestic Restaurant and Pendergast Club, 931 Broadway in Kansas City, Missouri. The J. Rieger Kansas City Distillery, oh so good. Friend of the podcast and panelist, Lane Boland. Managing to keep the podcast going. Apparently wealthy or not. Now onto our regularly scheduled program.
Just not getting it.
I want to welcome everybody out there in podcast land. The Good Times with Good People company proudly presents the Loft Party Podcast, where it is always about good times, good people, and good talk. Please subscribe to the Loft Party Podcast on YouTube, Facebook, and SoundCloud. Be sure to tell a friend, and welcome to the party. I'm your host and panel moderator, Rio, and let's introduce today's panel. First, we have Brian Massey. He is a data analyst at DST Systems. We have got Big Dave, that is Dave Elliott, owner of C&P Construction. We've got Sean Simmons. You know, I had you down as an account manager. What is actually your title?
My actual title is more like corporate trainer.
Corporate trainer.
Yeah.
So we want to make sure that we are being accurate here on the podcast. He is a corporate trainer for Taylor Farms, and of course our resident fruit and veggies man, Chris O'Connor. He is the co-owner of Liquid 9 Broadcast Media and the Anonymous Female, because he didn't want you to know her name. She is the right hand of the podcast, and we are thankful that we do get at least one woman to sit in amongst us heathen men and keep us on the line. So, we got a lot to talk about this week. As every week, there's so much going on in the world, and so I want to just jump right in with some stories. I want to see if anybody's heard anything about these. At home, I have not prepped anybody on what stories we're going to be talking about, other than to say that we are definitely going to discuss the Republican National Convention, because that, of course, was big enough and noteworthy enough to be talking about. And probably we're going to spend most of the podcast talking about that. But I do want to mention just some other stories that I saw in the news that were upsetting, to say the least. We had another mass shooting in Florida. 2 dead, 16 injured in Fort Myers at a teen club. So these were literal teenagers. One guy, I think, was
13 and 14-year-olds.
That
one was 17.
That and it's just amazingly disheartening that the de-evolution.
It's a breakdown of society.
Yeah,
We've lost our moral compass in some ways.
Not in some ways. It's
in a lot of ways.
In a lot of ways, and you know, the idea of like conflict resolution, or even how to cope with, you know, the things that are going on in the world. You know, I'm not 100% sure that that kind of thing is being taught anymore. It's like I say, it's scary.
How to use your words?
Yeah. I mean,
you hit the point there. It hasn't been taught.
Yeah. Wait, before we go on with the subject, I have to say, because we just got a surprise here in the Loft Party Podcast studios, Roy Scott, co-creator of H3, that is Healthy Hip Hop, came to join us. And he's going to sit in on the panel. What's up, Roy?
What's going on, homie? Sorry for the party.
That's all right. It's all right. Been a few weeks. Hey, like that. Keep it with the party theme. Party to the party. So we just started talking about the news of the day, and the first thing we brought up was the nightclub shooting in the teen club in Fort Myers. Got any thoughts on that before we go around the rest of the table?
I think it's very unfortunate and just ignorance. So the only first thing that comes to my mind is ignorance, that somebody could be that, that inhumane to take lives like that. So ignorance is the first thing that comes to mind, and sympathy for those families.
Yeah, absolutely. It looked like you were ready to jump in before Roy came.
It's not a teen club. It was teen night.
True.
At the club.
At that club.
Yeah, I'm just not a believer that the world's worse now than it ever was, and yada yada. I just think that's such rose-colored glasses to think of that. If you look at the history of this country, it's been abysmal in terms of how violent we are. Maybe there's more reporting of it now just because there's more access to information, etc. But I am not one of those people who looks back and goes, "Ah, man, America used to be great, and now we're sucking it up." It's been kind of good and kind of shitty the entire time, to be perfectly honest. You know, I don't think we're any more violent today than we were. I think we just hear about it a lot more.
So you don't think that that we need to make America great?
I do not feel this is. I feel like we've always been great, and I feel like we always have had our rewards. You know, and it's again, I mean, my God, what did we enslave people essentially for 300 years? You know, I mean, that wasn't too cool. We have a horrific history of violence there. And then you had, 70s and 80s weren't all that non-violent. You had a little bit of a drop-off in the 90s, and, now you're seeing probably a little bit of a comeback, or maybe you're just hearing about
when
it.
we were growing up, there were 2 or 3 really big riots in this country.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
There weren't. We've always had discord. I think the unfortunate thing about that, and it's what, Mayor James has done a good job here at trying to give teenagers a place to go in the summertime to have fun with themselves. A safe place. My understanding, what I picked up on this today, was that this was supposed to have been a teen party, a safe place for them to get. Their parents were coming to get them, and this was gang related. And when you got 14, 15, 16-year-olds with guns that have to prove themselves, this is what you end up with. And once again, it's a loss of the moral compass. Did they have anybody to tell them, no, you don't do this? That's the hard part to deal with there, and it's hard to accept sometimes. But there's always been that in one form or another. It's just that we used to square off and fisticuff. Or you might have a stabbing.
I don't know about all that. We used to.
But there was always
crap
guns,
on people
too.
in the South. I mean, we've done horrific things. I mean, you go back turn of the century. I mean, that was just good old-fashioned come play in the streets. Especially out west when there was uncharted territory. It's always been a violent country. And I think there's a more romantic notion of, well, when you had a problem, you used to just stand up and fight each other, and that has not always been the case. And there were school shootings when I was a kid. One right outside of Wichita in Pratt, Kansas.
But I think the disheartening thing is we're no better off now than we were when we started this country. So at some point, when do you grow out of that? I mean,
Sure.
we're not,
Well, yeah, kind of like what Jackie's talking about. It's like we talk about how we're progressing, or how we're getting better, or how we're better than we used to be. And we kind of, to your point, is there is no real progression. It's kind of like a shift, in a sense. So, like talking about, the violence, there was a guy who did a stat on mass shootings, and he said actually the mass shootings peaked in the 1920s. And again, going back to kind of what Chris was saying, is it peaked in the 1920s because you instituted prohibition and the gangsters were fighting over land, and with the introduction to the Tommy gun, you now had a gun that could just spray bullets and just kill people left and right.
Well, they were everywhere from World War I. World War I just hit and they flooded the
Well,
market.
the thing was they never used them in World War I.
Yeah.
The military never bought them.
But they manufactured.
So
Yeah.
So they just hit the market. They were cheap. They were easy. And it was literally an easy gun to use. All you did was just point, shoot, pull the trigger, and you sprayed a bunch of bullets. And again, the police weren't even using those at the time. So that's where you had that peak of your mass shootings and that kind of stuff. Going back to the Wild West, this guy was again talking about gun-related deaths, and he said, actually, everybody has this notion that there were a lot of shootings in the Wild West. He goes, there were shootings and there were shootouts in the street.
Sure.
But the idea was everybody had a gun, and therefore, if you were a little bit more cautious about who you stepped to, because maybe you're a faster shoot, maybe he's a faster shoot, maybe you're off that day, whatever. But it was a shooting.
You thought about it.
But you thought about it,
before you
exactly.
did it.
Before you actually engaged in that violence, you actually thought through it first before you did it. So, in a sense, I think today there's less thought through what you're going to do. When people just go out and do it, they just get angry and they step off and they go out and they do it. And
Well,
then
they said from what I know that this was thought through though. That Orlando incident, from what I heard.
Right.
Oh, absolutely.
The guy, he was kind of a.
Right,
Well,
and
they
some of them
are, but
and some of
they're
them
not.
aren't. You know, it's
Yeah.
like they let their emotions get a hold of them. They think through it, but they let their emotion hold them the whole entire time versus taking a step back of it and saying, okay, what's next? After I shoot this guy or after I shoot these people, what's next? You know, because, you know, something's going to happen next. You know, for some of the guys who go out and do terror stuff, their idea is, I'm going to die. And they go into it wanting to die. You know, so for them, they've already thought out the what next. You know, but for some of these other guys, I think they go into it, especially the gangland shooting, it's a territorial thing, but I think it's also an emotional response to that territorial thing without thinking, okay, there's got to be another way to solve this problem other than just picking up the gun, proving my stance or proving my
Which I
manhood in
think
a sense, and doing that versus being, okay, the smarter guy figures a way around that.
Which I think is what Mario's saying. You know, there's not a lot of thought or consideration or.
Yeah,
You know, I'm going to do this, and who cares what the consequences are.
Yeah, and I definitely agree that the country has always had a violent history. You know, I definitely don't have on my rose-colored glasses for that. I guess my thought is, you know, for the hundreds of years that this country has been around, yes, we're still a young nation in the grand scheme of the other nations in the world, but you would think, you know, we would be spawning a few more critical thinkers than we're.
But how do we know that we're not making progress? I mean, there's a million ways to measure this. So you can go, well, is it the number of incidences of violence? Is that it? Is it violence per portion of your population? You know, I mean, like, what statistic are you going to use to say we are or are not making progress? I have no idea.
That's a point.
Well,
It's
but they
interesting
measure it now by the number of murders every year.
But we have 300 million Americans now versus when we had 100 million
But you can
Americans in the
compare
19th
that.
century.
It
Right.
is still comparable. You can come to a percentage of.
So I'm saying per capita, is that it? Is it the type of crime? I mean, what
Let's
is
talk
the
to
real?
our data guy.
Actually, interestingly enough, if you use either of those right now, it's saying that crime rate is down overall.
Absolutely.
Say that, Brian. Say it again, Brian.
If you use either one of those statistics, they say that crime rate is down overall, especially for the past 15 years.
They were saying that on the news this morning, and the reporters were arguing with each other.
And you may
that's
be
not
right.
the
It's a
case.
matter of how you want to
So,
look at it.
not
Because
only is it
why?
one slice
The
of
news
it.
cycle is so boom, right there. So everything that happens gets magnified. So, you know, we may be declining, but boy, that doesn't make the news in the morning when you turn on
So
the
the
maybe
reporting of it.
overall violence is down.
Who got killed overnight
But-
is the main story,
Yeah,
right?
if it bleeds, it leads, as they say in
Yeah.
the news game.
But have we went from single person shootings to now mass shootings are the thing?
There've always been
Like-
mass shootings.
Yeah, I don't think that's ever changed.
We got a lot of
Yeah.
access to it, like I said earlier, just with social media,
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
and
Yeah, I think
we're getting to
that's
see the actual.
I think that's the
we've never
thing.
been able to actually see it happen. Like we're seeing
Yeah.
folks get killed, like by the police.
Oh, yeah.
That happened
24/7,
Never
right on
actually-
When you can actually see it, like
Yeah.
on you can just pop it up on here.
Oh,
We've
yeah.
never been able to do that, so now
Yeah.
we're
Like you may know, and you may know somebody, you may anecdotally know people, but I think now, like you say, the reporting of it.
Right.
Were you
is-
done with
is
what you were
heightened.
saying?
Right.
It's just
We
interesting to come
interrupted.
back a little bit to our topic with the Republican Party is that the things they were talking about, they're really playing on people's feels, and they say it feels like it's more dangerous to be outside. But statistics say otherwise.
Right.
Yeah, actually, I was looking at something.
Well, every side does
This
that.
was it this morning where they were talking about the feelings. People like it was saying that feelings seem to be replacing facts.
Yes.
Yes.
And yeah, and because
That it's a feelings report, not a fact report anymore.
yeah.
Well,
and,
yeah.
Facts never win the day. Facts never win the day.
Right.
But what they're saying is the facts no longer matter
Right.
when they're having a discussion.
And I don't think they
That's
ever
what's
mattered
terrifying.
in general.
Right.
And I would say, again,
I think they
it's
mattered.
how persuasive you are as a speaker. It's how what slant you want to look at it from. Everything's a fact.
Right.
You know, you could be in a two-person race and one person wins and one person comes in second. It's like, man, You can report it as, man, I just came in second in the race and did phenomenal,
Yeah.
which a lot of people do. Or the other side says, hey, we just won the race. They're both factual statements, correct? I'm with you.
Yeah.
But it's just a matter of how you want to put it out there. Facts never win.
Yeah, I think like a concise way of putting it is there's a difference between perception and reality, and what people perceive it to be is being played on more and more than taking people and saying, here's the reality, here's the actual facts, here's the reality to the situation. Reality is, like you said, shootings and death are down, but the perception, because again, like you said, mass media,
You see it more.
and it's not just the media, it's as a guy with a cell phone, you now are part of the media. You can record that. And again, the bombings that happen in Turkey and in those places it was just random people with their cell phones out, taping it. On their, I shouldn't even say taping it, recording it on their cell phones, and then posting it. So again, I look at it back like in the '80s when I was a kid, watching the news. Again, you didn't have a 24-hour news cycle. You had your regular news channel. It was on at like 5:30 and 10. And again, what would they say? They'd say 4 people shot in Orlando. Gunman
6 a.m.,
gunman has
5
been
p.m. and 10 p.m.
the gunman has been arrested. It was so and so, blah blah blah, and that was it. And again, it was just a straight matter of fact statement of gunman was shot, and you didn't see the video of the police. You didn't see the bodies in the street. You didn't have all the people running out there. It was just matter of fact, here it is, and then you went on to the next thing.
Well, and I think
not to
that's
say that it
with
was cold,
everything.
but yeah.
I think it really is with everything, because they talk about how kidnappings happen more.
Mm-hmm.
No, they don't. You just know about them quicker.
Well, I think that's a problem with the 24-hour news channel is that they constantly have to have things to show people.
You have to fill that space.
Was
I
it
think a
not
lot
an
of our
equal problem
issues
to
are
be
with the
editorial?
Wait a minute, slow down. We can't hear everybody.
Sorry, Dave, go ahead.
Go ahead.
Yeah, well, I was just going to say one thing about that. It's an equal problem to me when you had a 30-minute news window and you made editorial choices about what you were going to say and not say. And you denied Americans facts forever because you literally had to squeeze everything into 30 minutes, and you don't want to squeeze it into 30 minutes. So you had just some random dude saying, this is the news we'll cover and this is the news we want.
But what happened with you hearing something and going out and researching it yourself?
There was no way to research it back then. And so you had literally people controlling the news spin.
Well,
So speaking,
Back then,
actually that's a good place to pivot to the next thing. The head of Fox News stepping down. Of course, he's stepping down amidst allegations of sexual harassment and all of that. But really, him and Rupert Murdoch are really talking about the 24-hour news cycle. They're really kind of the architects of.
No, Ted
Well,
Turner.
they definitely.
Ted Turner was.
But this new form of reporting where you're on this 24-hour cycle, and I think the one thing that didn't change, it feels like a change, which gets back to the whole feelings versus facts. It feels like a change, but it didn't, in that there was a slant. That every network had a slant to how they reported stories. But it feels like because you're hearing 24 full hours of this slant, now I think people are actually feeling, oh, they're conservative station. Oh, they're liberal, because you're not getting, like you say, a 30, 40-second soundbite of a story. You're getting full 24 hours a day now of a certain slant of reporting. Right. And so I just thought it was interesting when I was looking at the story about him stepping down due to these allegations, that it's interesting that the man behind the news becomes the news. That I thought that was
This kind of see who he is, though. I mean, obviously a bright man. He's obviously came up with a plan that was very successful and made that station number one for what it is.
Yeah, I mean,
For what it
20
is.
years he ran Fox.
So he brought it up and made it what it is, just like the guy who founded ESPN, and those guys brought it up and made ESPN what it is. So, it's this mega thing all of a sudden.
Well, and
So he's an old school guy, and old school guys will flirt with the ladies. They got a little bit of an ego, especially as they get older. I flirt with the ladies as I get older. I do. Because you want to build yourself back up a little bit. You're getting older and you want somebody to think that you're okay.
I don't think that has to
Now,
do with age. I think
well,
that's
maybe
men
not.
in general.
But
human
I do
beings
think-
in general like to flirt.
I'm making a little bit of a point.
But I
here.
do think generationally, I know where you're going. As a matter of fact, I saw, what were we watching? Doesn't matter. But the guy was talking about the era you were born in.
Right.
You know, 50s guys, 60s
Absolutely.
guys, 70s guys.
Bill Maher.
Yeah, but I think his point was valid. You know, the era that you're born in, how you grew up in your household, what you saw, you know, between your mother and father, and you know how your father or mother behaved out in the world, and these guys, and you know, like Trump, getting back to the original topic thing, is, you know, they're from an era, you know, I always say they're from the Mad Men era.
Well, and he said he will be the last 50s man to ever run for
To
president.
hold office, yeah.
I agree with that. I think
Yeah, I mean, because
Trump
he's
is very like
79.
that.
Well, and he was
so-
talking about how people that were born and grew up in the 50s think the 60s were horrible, and the people that were born and grew up in the 60s think the 50s were horrible.
Yeah, and
And vice versa on up.
yeah, and every decade feels
Yeah.
like the decade before them was worse. So I definitely understand. I think there's something innate in men, but I do think each decade's generation approaches the world a little different.
Yeah, I don't disagree with that at all. And kind of to your point, and your point is, you know, I always look at older gentlemen, you know, and they say things to the ladies that I know if I said it, there'd be a lawsuit or I get slapped. And
It is kind of funny how you kind of put up with it differently
Right.
from different age groups.
And it is, and it's funny to see how the ladies react. And it's like, man, and I always sit there and say to myself, I can't wait until I can be old and a dirty old man, because right now as a young guy, you just can't get away with
A
it,
little
right?
bit though, because what we do is I like to compliment the ladies.
Right.
I want to tell a lady I find her attractive, or I find her pretty, or I find she has a good personality.
Yeah.
You know, I like to sit down and have a drink with her and talk to her. My grandfather married to grandma for 50-some years, but that was a smooth ladies' man. I mean, he'd get the girls out on the dance floor and dance
that
with
doesn't go away just because you get married.
Right, it doesn't go away. That's my point.
I don't think that's.
And there's
the issue that
nothing
we're
wrong
discussing.
with being that as long as you stay true to your spouse.
Well, you say,
I don't think that's the issue that we're even remotely talking about. Everybody gets that, and I think everybody is okay with that to some degree. I mean, of course, in a bar, I'm gonna go up and hit on everybody I can think of. But I think the issue is when you're in a workplace,
Yes.
and everybody knows better than to do it in the workplace.
That's where it's
And
based.
Well,
this
it's
is where the
worse
problems are
when
coming.
you're
Right.
in a position
Right.
of power.
Absolutely. If you're Roger
Whether
Ailes, there's no way
male or
everybody's
female,
reporting.
when you're in the position of power, that should never even
Right.
happen.
But
and they all know better.
Well,
So
and
single one
she
was
came
not
out and said this happened, and they blasted her, and now they're saying, if this happened to you, come forward and tell us. So,
yeah, 'cause there started to be other women
Right.
in that work.
Well, and again, you know, kind of like I was saying is, even in the workplace, I would see guys say stuff that, and again, I think it comes back to what era you were born in. Like, I was born and raised in the era where you don't say those kind of things. Like, even to the point where you almost don't even tell a lady she's attractive when you're at work, because that can be considered sexual harassment. And you're constantly drilled that in a workplace, like especially in a corporate office like I have. You actually have to take training, and you have to do it every 2 years, and you have to do it online, and it's always like, is this inappropriate? And if you get it wrong, you got to go back and retake it until you get it right, and then you got to submit it to HR. Whereas I think those guys back in the day telling a lady she's attractive, that was actually good manners. That was actually being polite. That was actually
it
being
was,
kind.
and I mean, it
50-50.
Yeah.
but,
Well, yeah, no, it did.
Wait, hold on, what'd you say, Chris?
Well, I'm not saying like,
Well,
hey, nice
50-50.
breasts. I'm just saying,
I'm not going to assume that there's a
But
bunch
you
of
know
good
what?
hearted
Wait,
guys.
hold on,
no.
hold on. Wait, what'd you say, Chris?
There's not
He
that
said-
many good-hearted dudes running around not hitting on women in the office.
Well, no, I understand,
You know,
I understand,
every day.
I
Let's
understand.
be honest.
Well, I understand.
But
Sincere
the-
compliments are few and far between.
But
yeah.
the sad thing is, it also depends on the perception of who you're saying it to.
True.
So, You know,
That is also
I'm kind of a
unfortunate.
touchy-feely person in the way that when I'm talking to you, that can be perceived as sexual harassment just by me touching you.
Just
Right.
so-
Oh, yeah,
just so you
It
know out
doesn't
there-
matter how I did it. You
Yeah.
know,
Just so you know out there in podcast land, she just sexually harassed me. She put her hands all over my shoulder, and I feel violated.
it's a big
Just-
shoulder.
This is very true. This is very true. Remember that.
Wait a
Just
second,
know.
podcast land, Mario does not feel
Just
violent.
know.
He feels very happy. He likes it.
You what were you finna say, Roy?
I was gonna say, and also with the touchy feely, some men take that or women take that as like you kind of coming on to them.
Right.
Like,
Yeah,
women
it
touch me like, hey,
really
yeah, like-
is. You have to know the people that you're around and know the boundaries.
Yeah, I remember working retail once, and we were behind the cash wrap, and the girl, she was against the counter. I needed to come behind her, so I was coming behind her, and I just touched her back, letting her know I'm behind you, so she wouldn't back up, and she freaked out.
You were in
The friend zone?
Yeah.
Friend.
Yeah. No, I was fully in the neutral zone, upper part of the back, but she freaked out. And it was Christmas time. It was like store full of customers. Don't you touch me. I was like, whoa.
That's other issues.
Yeah,
I'm just
yeah.
gonna say, as a female, there's some other bullshit issues going on with
No,
that.
and I'm sure that it was, but it always made me cautious.
Right.
Of, like you said, just of knowing people a little bit better before I did or said anything, because I'm a generally friendly person, so I don't want it to get misconstrued, and I've definitely had some situations to be misconstrued over the years.
Sure.
Not necessarily even in the workplace, just knowing people, and then you do or say something, and all of a sudden you got a stalker at your front door, and you're like, what the hell just happened?
I find it
I'm
a
just
little-
glad I'm getting old.
That's good.
That's awesome.
Oh, yeah.
That's
I
actually,
still think
yeah.
this is a work-related issue.
Take me
and
for what
if
I
I had to choose between, would I rather? And again, most rules in corporate America are made for the least common denominator. You do them to avoid a problem,
Yes.
not because you don't have a problem yet.
Right.
So, in my mind, if I had to choose between having a workplace where people were a little overly sensitive and watched their P's and Q's a little more versus, just letting it all hang out and doing their thing, well, I'd rather them be a little more responsible.
Yeah.
I'm okay with that. I also find it exceptionally degrading to women, like who have had to work exceptionally hard to make it in the workplace and generally work as hard, if not harder, than most men I know for less money.
Well-
And don't get into the positions of advancement.
Yes.
It's very difficult, and you want to be taken seriously. And then to have some old dude come along and rub your back and tell you you're looking good, how come it's never like, no, you're really smart, great report. It's very,
Yeah.
it's more like,
Yeah,
hey, you
actually,
look really
we
good
were
today.
watching.
I was gonna say that,
we were-
Ballers
Yeah, watching
last
Ballers
night.
last night, and the
Reporter.
reporter. She's sitting down talking to her boss about a guy who got hired after her, who's getting paid like 20 grand more than she is.
But
That she's basically having to train along. And all he can say was, "Oh, legs, calm down." Like, what happened to your sense of humor?
I would throw it out as the classic, this is all the proof that I need. I don't know very many guys who walk into an office and tell another guy, you look really good today. You're killing it. Man, you look awesome.
That is a very few.
It's not happening.
It's very few.
So that to me is a clear dividing line. I'm like, God,
Yeah, if you would, I guess, if you
you're being disingenuous.
So remember, out there in podcast land, if you wouldn't say it to your homeboy at work, don't say it to your homegirl at work. It's probably the best rule of thumb we can get.
well, there's nothing wrong with complimenting people.
Someone said to their homeboy.
You
that.
can, you can. Well, maybe girls do it,
Yeah, I think
But if
women may do it more
If
than-
I see a coworker that's a guy and I'm like, you look really nice today, or whatever,
Yeah.
But
But,
I
yeah.
wouldn't,
I definitely understand what you're saying. I have always been in the habit of, oh, you got your hair cut, or oh, that's a nice, but I also goes back to that one day which the girl freaked completely out on me.
It is hard.
Yeah.
Because
You've been traumatized.
they could go to HR and say she's harassing me.
Yeah.
And you know, there's nothing I could do.
Being somebody who works at the same company as her, do you think that she's a harasser? We need to know these things.
No. For the record.
For the record. The anonymous female is not.
We'll go off record after podcast.
Okay, all right.
I'm pretty professional at work.
Okay. All right, so I definitely have other things that I kind of printed off and was gonna touch on, but I definitely want to get to the meat of today's podcast, and that is the RNC last week. So whether or not you are with or not with the Republican Party, just your thoughts on Trump and his speech and his choice for VP and his wife's speech, and I'm sure everybody's got some thoughts on that stuff. And we'll start safe and work up. Mike Pence. What are we thinking about Mike Pence? I do suppose if you had to choose on the Republican side, anybody to run with Trump, this is probably the safest pick he probably could have picked.
Yeah.
Yeah. What do you think, Griff?
I know he tried to get John Kasich, and Kasich turned him down, who I thought would have been an infinitely better choice.
Probably.
Just because he is much more adept at steering legislation through and things like that. And honestly, the only reason on earth I would ever even consider voting for Trump is because I don't want legislation to ever get through. I like it when the government does nothing. And so I'm a big fan of gridlock. I love it. And so I hope it's 4 years of nothingness. And then, we go on to somebody else who does nothing. But I don't know. I thought that the whole thing was kind of a circus act. It was very poorly orchestrated for a TV spectacle from a guy who is on TV all the time. So that was a little bit weird. But to be honest, I think you're going to see the same thing this week in the Democrats. I think it's going to be just an absolute shit show with the Bernie Sanders people, and now you have Debbie Wasserman Schultz and everything she did to rig, kind of help Hillary out. It's just you have two hyper divided parties, and so it's just going to be a clown show all the way around.
Yeah, I thought that was interesting that she's still gonna open and close.
Well,
We'll see.
because she's still the head of the DNC, they can't take her out. Right.
She actually came out today when they were going to do some of that, and she kind of took a step back because she was getting booed. Like, there were a lot of boos this morning for her.
She's supposed to gavel in and gavel out,
Right.
and somebody else is running the rest of it.
She's the interim chairperson.
Oh
Yeah.
yeah. Donna Brazil.
Yep.
Is gonna be there.
Who's actually great.
Yeah. I like Donna. I've seen her
I heard
on a lot of shows. Sharp lady.
She's phenomenal on election night
I
coverage.
don't-
She's usually very good, very astute.
I don't know a lot about Pence yet. I just what I've seen, and it's just very awkward. Awkwardness.
One of the big things for pulling Pence in, one is he's a religious guy, so you're going to be able to speak to the Christian conservatives, be able to pull them in. Also, he is also out of the state of Ohio, which is a battleground state, so that's another way of them basically being able to capture that state, which is exactly
Indiana. He's from
Indiana. That's right, Indiana. Which is
Not a Delaware
Same
state,
reason
but-
for
right.
Hillary
But
Clinton.
he's but he's kind of in that arena. So it's one of those guys that they brought in to be able to gather the guys who are a little bit further on the right. So that's what it is. That and he's a safer guy, a little bit softer spoken, a little bit less stuff in his closet. So, he's just kind of he's literally VP. He's just a guy who's there. But again, he is a guy that knows politics and knows how to get things done. And that's why, again, that's not Trump's strong suit. So that's what he needs, is he needs that person who can sit down and say, he's going to say, okay, I want to do this. But you also need somebody who can sit to say, here's how you get it done, because the way you want to get it done or the way you're used to getting things done in business doesn't work
and
in
the
in
VPs
politics.
work with Congress more than the presidents do anyway, so.
The president can't make a law. All
Right.
they can do is vote on the law.
You vote on
So
it.
they
Yeah.
don't get any say in that anyway.
And your VP is the president of the
Is the
House.
head of the House.
Yeah, he's the president of the House.
He's the liaison.
Yep.
Yeah.
He's also the tiebreaker.
He's the tiebreaker vote.
Yep.
Yeah. Anybody on this side of the table? Wanna jump in before we go to our next person of interest?
Didn't Trump say he wanted him in charge of foreign and domestic policy?
Yes.
That was Kasich,
Kasich,
actually.
he offered Kasich,
Yeah.
Which is
ridiculous.
ridiculous
Which is like,
to begin with, because that's everything.
yeah, that's everything.
All right.
All right.
Does anybody remember Johnny Quest?
Sure.
Yeah.
Doesn't he look like Ray Spannon?
Oh.
That came to me, you know. Maybe he can get Haji to come in and do some magic and stuff, you know. No, but I think he was a governor. He was in, you know, in the Congress, and he definitely, I think Sean makes the right point in saying that Trump needs that guy behind him. And I think he's a lot better guy than Cheney was with Bush. Cheney was an evil man in a lot of ways. I don't think Pence is an evil man. I think Pence is a man that is a person who will want to try to do the country right. And I don't think that Trump wants to do the country wrong. These are some very interesting and difficult choices that we're sitting on right now. And so it's, you know, you got to decide what you're going to stomach.
But be careful with Cheney, though, because when Cheney was named VP for George Bush, one of the things everybody in the media, whether it was Fox or MSN, all they said was that the great thing about Cheney is he was more nuanced than Bush was, and everybody thought that that was a good pick for Bush. So nobody really had it out too much for Cheney until, you know, 2-3 years into the presidency, and then it was like,
Well,
okay.
they didn't know how
Yeah.
It was
bad
gonna
he
end up-
was,
right.
Well,
yeah.
now that's my problem is that with Cheney was that he was part of the generation and type of thinkers that war is fought to make money,
Yeah.
and instead of fighting a war to win a war. I'm not against fighting a war when the war is just and needs to be won.
Right.
But this is about the industrial complex and the money, and these are the problems that I had with him as overall. I think he had some good points. I don't mean to call him totally evil, but you know, he was definitely part of
I mean to call him
pretty
totally.
rough.
I'm
He was
gonna
pretty
go out on a
evil.
limb. I'm gonna say I think he was completely evil, but he is also not in office anymore, and thank goodness for it.
I would argue it's a little bit short-sighted if you look back at the Gulf War and how quickly we won the first one and got out of there, and nobody stuck around for years and years and years. They yanked them out, you know, and I think both Rumsfeld and Cheney were very good at exercising massive military power, overwhelming force, winning very quickly. I think the problem they did not anticipate was how hard it was going to be to reconstruct Iraq when you have 3 different warring factions who hate each other.
Well,
It's the
there's
same
the
thing
boy.
you see in Yugoslavia that then dissolved under
I agree.
Clinton, and so
He's been the opposite.
nobody gets on Clinton,
Right.
you know, and Clinton didn't even go to the UN, he went to NATO.
Well,
Because he knew he would be vetoed at the UN. So it's just, you got to be fair across the board on these things when you start throwing those bombs. I mean, there's.
Which is actually one of the reasons that I like having Chris on the panel, because he has such a long historic memory that
So very old.
yeah, I'm about to say
No.
because you know, because I admit, as knowledgeable as I try to be, you know, my feelings on things definitely color my historical knowledge, you know, sometimes.
that's a good way to put it.
So let's move off of Pence and let's get on to the Melania Trump speech.
I get on her.
Yeah.
Oh, you're talking about.
I'm sure you would, Sean, when we're talking about the speech,
And
right?
once again, you should say that in the workplace.
I object.
I just thought it was interesting that like one, how many days it went on with, you know, who's claiming responsibility for the writing of the speech, and you know, when instead of just saying my bad, you know, like, you know, we obviously went to some great First Lady speeches, and we pulled some pieces out that we thought fit what I was feeling.
Right.
But, you know, I just didn't even think that, you know, that the sizable chunk that I took from Michelle Obama's speech was that recent, and but I still feel this way. You know, it was the whole, well, she didn't write it. Well, I did write it. Well, this person's going to get
Well,
fired. Well, they're not going to get fired. I'm
Yeah.
just like,
What do
come
you
on,
feel was
folks.
disingenuous?
No, I don't know if
Plagiarism and this.
That's the main question.
But how
Was
do
it
you know it
disingenuous?
wasn't her? They didn't fix her words. She didn't write something and they made it pretty. They literally took somebody else's words and put them in her mouth.
Which has been done time and time again.
So how do you know if it's disingenuous?
They could have been a little
You
more
don't.
creative.
But
though,
I love
think.
when people
Yeah.
get caught on it. Biden's been caught on it several times. I mean,
Yeah.
a ton of people have been caught on it. It's just, my God,
Well-
on the biggest stage in the world.
I think that was my thing. Like,
They
this
said-
is such a
Dumb, aren't
huge
you?
stage.
Well, they said leading up to it, she wrote the speech herself, and then it came out.
Right.
She's saying it, and she didn't.
So a woman whose first language is not English decided to write her own speech
Right.
in front of the biggest audience,
Yeah.
in the world. At that
Yeah.
point.
But isn't that politics?
Yeah. Well,
Isn't that bottom line politics? They're going to say that they did it themselves, when you know good and
But
well
I'm
that they
kinda-
had a speechwriter.
Speechwriter.
Everything is vetted. And
well,
what you're going to say and speak up there.
Yes.
Right.
And I'm kind of with Mario though. I'm like, how many days did it really have to go on before you were just like, sorry?
right. Well,
Yeah, I don't, look, people make mistakes all the time. Like you say, this is not the first time somebody's had excerpts of other speeches found in their speeches. But I guess, which I guess gets me back to what we were talking about earlier, just at a certain point, haven't we learned enough as a society to just say, you know what, my bad, I feel this way, but Michelle said it really well, and I just want to double down on that sentiment.
right.
Instead of and maybe I think, like I say, because we're so hyper divided, and as we're hyper divided as a nation and hyper divided within the parties. Like, nobody wants to, which we kind of talked about a couple podcasts ago, nobody wants to lose that game of inches, And, if you give an inch, then you feel like you've given away 5 miles when really you gave away a centimeter.
Let's be honest, what vote did she lose for him?
None.
She didn't lose a
Yeah,
single
well,
vote.
no.
So big deal. She could have handled it however she wanted and wouldn't have lost a single vote
Right.
either way. The Republicans didn't care, and the Democrats gives them a little bit to talk about for a little while, makes a great news story, but nobody gives a crap. And I bet you literally 2/3 of this country didn't even know what happened.
Right.
Sitting here right now, I bet you they didn't know what happened.
Well, now the thing is, how is Michelle going to respond to that when she speaks at the
She'll
convention?
make a funny line about it, and she'll go on and,
And which is kind of what I'm thinking is going to happen.
I think that's the problem, is the Democratic side's gonna all look at it and go, see, I told you, look how bad they are. I mean, the only people that are really caring are the ones that are on the other side that are trying to find issues.
Well,
going on.
You have half the people on the Democratic side right now pointing at Hillary and Debbie Washington Schultz and saying, look how bad they are.
Right, yeah,
And that's
I'm-
within their own party.
I'm not.
I mean, it's
That's-
just a nonsense
Yeah.
thing.
Well,
It's-
Exactly.
a very
It's
split
just, the
country.
fact is, you're not changing minds, right?
Right.
At this point, it's
all elections are decided by 5% of undecided voters.
And it's usually within the first, last 2 weeks right before the vote anyways. Kind of talking about what we were just talking about is nobody decided on who's going to be the president based off the first lady, let alone the vice president. I mean, I think it's like the vice president only actually brings in 1% of a vote to that guy. So to me, it's just, again, going back to the news cycle, you have to fill that news cycle, and this is something we can talk about. The other thing is, I don't think anybody should ever be shocked that a president or anybody within his staff has a speechwriter. They all have speechwriters.
Yeah.
That's just a thing of it. Now, this speechwriter, actually, she did come out and say that she went to resign, and the Trump organization actually declined her resignation.
Yeah, and they asked him
Yeah.
about it.
And, and then the thing is, to what you're saying is, you got to feel bad for a lady whose English is not her first language. She knows 5 languages, and I guarantee English was probably one of the last ones she ever learned, based off of where she lives,
Right.
on that kind of stuff. So it's got to be really nerve-wracking when you're on the largest stage. You're promoting your husband to the most powerful job in the United States, and you're in front of a bunch of people you don't know, and you're speaking a language you don't know very well. I kind of feel bad for her in that regards. Now, there was another guy who actually studies speeches. One of the things he sat down and he said was he went and he studied the speeches. Some of the things that Michelle Obama said that this young lady said, well, Bob Dole's wife said it. during the acceptance speech for her husband.
Yeah.
So but nobody brings that up because again, you're going even further back. You're also going back in a time where we didn't have the internet, we didn't have the news cycle, so it's not right there. I mean, he actually had to pull the transcripts of the speech. Like you couldn't go out and find it.
Right,
so
right.
it's one of those things where it's like everybody uses the same thing when they're talking about their husband. So it's not ungenuine for me to sit there and say, you know, my wife is one of the most caring and honest women that I know. I mean, it would be something else if she came out and said, my husband's a real sleazebag, guys. Like, really, you need to think twice about voting for this dude. Okay, how many wives has he had? And I probably won't be here after, you know, if he serves 1-2 terms as president, I'll probably be out and there'll be another skinny blonde in my place, you know, 8 years from now. You know,
It was just the exactness of the language. I mean,
Right.
I think that's really what it is.
There wasn't an effort to make it personal or
Oh, no,
anything like
absolutely
that.
not.
It was just a copy. And beyond that, I think one of the other things that people are not talking about is how phenomenal Ivanka Trump was.
Well,
She was tremendous
Yeah.
on Thursday, and I think made up for a lot of what happened on Monday.
This may get to Podcast Castle, but I am not a fan of Trump. Anything Trump. I'm not a fan of the kid. Now I will say this: as far as on a professionalism level, Ivanka's as polished as I've ever seen a human
She was
being
great.
be. But I am not a huge fan of those kids. There's something about them, and it's something about them all that comes across wildly disingenuous to me, and I don't know what it is.
Like Chelsea's $3 million salary from the Clinton
you know what? I
Foundation.
can.
Yeah, well, yeah.
Disingenuous.
I was gonna say I could
Seems
probably put one on there
disingenuous
too.
to me.
No, you know what? I'm not saying that does seem genuine either, but it's just something
What a
about
scam.
it's just something about the Trump
Actually-
kids. They just all seem like salesmen
All right.
Well,
to me.
Well, they kind of are.
I want to go with
I think one of the most important things you do when you're trying to judge a person is you got to put yourself in their shoes. And that's a difficult thing to do sometimes. You got to think about how these kids grew up. With Trump as their daddy, and several divorces, several wives, and Vanna as the first wife, who was a pretty strong personality in her own right. You're raised in a different way. You're raised in a different atmosphere. I think the one thing that came out of it said that, you know, whether they did or didn't, they all said that they worked through the system. They worked in their father's business. He made them go to work.
Oh yeah.
So I think it's hard for us to turn around and try to understand that they come from a certain elitism. And that elitism is a little hard for us to see through, to see if there's really a genuine person there, or are we just seeing the elitism of it? Am I
But
kinda
there's a
hitting-
way
am
that
I
they
kind of
come
hitting your point,
off.
Sean? Is that kind of what you were on?
Well, it was kind of around that way, kind of like what you're talking about, you know, they worked for their dad, they did this. And think about this, Donald Trump's able to put buildings up in New York City faster than most people. That means you have to know how to work the system, you know how to work those types of people, you have to know how to make those kinds of things happen. And a lot of times when that happens in business, especially as fast as they move it through, it's not exactly always the correct way of doing it, but it's getting it done.
Well,
so it's finding a way to get it done. And I
being
think
a contractor,
that's
Hold
kind
on
of
one
their
second.
behavior.
What were you about to say, Brian?
I just thought your comment on you know the elitism is really interesting, just in the sense that you know these kids are going to work and their last name is on the front of the building, and I think that's interesting.
There's something to that creates a certain character here. And as a contractor, to get to Sean's point, there is a ton of ego in a contractor. And the best contractors, I mean, Trump's had some massive failures, but he's always bounced back from them failures. He's learned from them, and he's lost money and made money so many times over. He's doing it on at this huge scale, which is no different than the smaller scale that myself and my general contractors work on. We all have the ability to make some money. Lord, I know we can lose it just as fast. I've been there. All right, and so it is just this thing out there, and this ego and this thing that you have to do that you are successful. And the bottom line is, as far as a businessman goes, whether you like him or not, whether you like his brashness or not, he's able to make things happen.
Now, I will say that kind of actually gets back to last podcast we were talking about when we were playing finish the sentence. So, and one of the sentences to finish is a millionaire. And you were saying that a millionaire is just a frustrated billionaire, but there's a certain mentality of a person who wants to make $1 million.
Sure.
Because when they get it, then they want 10, and when they get 10, they want 100, and when they get 100, they want $1 billion. But I think coupling that with you are already born into a few of those million, then that's when you get the kind of the elitism thing, which actually pivots me to the next thing, Trump and the 75-minute apocalyptic speech that he gave, because it was in my view just a very and I don't think it was in his view. I will give him that. I think he may have felt like what he was saying was uplifting, but but the entire speech felt really dark and heavy. And so I was curious about what the panel thought about that. I'm gonna start here with Chris only because I know you've got to leave us sooner than later. So
Yeah, I think you give these speeches for what your specific audience wants to hear. It's not about appealing to the mass of America. He wasn't going to change your mind regardless of what he said. So I believe that you give your rabid fan base, and they are reasonably rabid when it comes to Trump, exactly what they want. And so I think for who he is trying to appeal to, he nailed it. Is it my kind of speech? Not particularly, because I'm not a huge fan of all of his politics. But that being said, I think it was a perfectly well-crafted speech for the audience that he was delivering it to. And it went well for him. And again, all you were trying to do is sway 5% of America to like you. And I think he's got a reasonable chance for a couple of reasons. I think Gary Johnson's going to steal a lot of votes from somebody. I think the Green Party is going to steal a lot of votes from Hillary. And now I think you have a bunch of disaffected Bernie Sanders voters who think the entire thing is rigged anyway, and that gives you a fighting chance. Within that margin, you can find the 5% pretty easily. And again, remember, Bill Clinton won both times without ever reaching a majority.
True. It's funny. We were looking at, might have been a couple of weeks ago, we were looking at a Bill Maher show, and no matter what you think of him personally or his work, I thought that the most interesting comment of the whole night was actually from Michael Moore, and because the audience that goes to the Bill Maher show is generally more of a liberal audience, and they're just gonna boo anything that even rhymes with Trump. But Michael Moore said, I think we're selling the situation short. It is very likely, it could happen. No, it's very likely that he could become president.
Sure. Yeah.
So don't write it off. Like, if you're actually passionate about him not getting in office, you've got to make a stand somewhere. And because I think the conversation started with, which actually pivots to another thing that I was going to talk about, was the people who are so Bernie, that they don't want to now, the way that the Republicans have said, okay, our guy is out. Obviously, except for maybe the Ted Cruz people who wanted to hold on to a little bit of that during the convention, but there's a lot of Bernie people who are not willing to let it go and say, okay, we'll go with the party, because they really wanted their guy.
Right.
Well, he was in a tough spot. Was he to backtrack and support her? I mean, I think you technically support her, but
he did support her, though.
No.
But I know what you're
very
saying.
tepidly you supported her.
Oh, yeah.
In fact, he said Tim Kaine would never have been my choice. I wanted Elizabeth Warren. He said a million things that kind of keep his brand of I'm kind of gonna half-ass support you because I gotta do it.
Because I got to do it.
But we all know that nobody really wants you there. And besides that, I think most people are exceptionally lukewarm on Hillary. She's a lot of people who hate her, and the people who like her are fairly lukewarm. You know, so I think voter turnout will be minimal in this election. This isn't like the last two. You know, I think you're going to see a lot of people stay at home and not vote, and that gives Trump a pretty good chance.
And that does give Trump a pretty good chance. Roy? You look like you were finna say something.
No, I just think that as much as, you know, I'm not pro-Trump or pro-Hillary, but I think Trump is, like, very entertaining.
He's
You know,
fun.
he's just fun to look at. He just look. I mean, as ridiculous as he may look or sound, he's just entertaining. People like that.
And people like to be entertained.
Right.
But
That is
they
the reason.
don't
That's the
like
reason
this.
that's the reason with the anonymous female's brother just coming back from Italy. You know, we were looking at their pictures they took at the Coliseum, but that was the reason that they built them. It was to entertain the mob.
Yep.
And he knows how to entertain the mob. He just does.
But the interesting thing about Trump is that the one thing the Republican Party has always tried to do is really entertain the evangelicals. They want to bring the evangelicals in. And the evangelicals have gotten too radical. They've gotten way too off course in what is overall best for the country and how you have to find ways to hit middle grounds. Trump is, I don't think he's an atheist, but but he's certainly not an evangelical.
No.
Well, I believe he said he's a religious man. I think.
Oh,
Well,
I would think
It's hard as a Republican to not say that.
Yeah, right.
I would think that the man is probably, like I said, has some feelings about God and believes in God. I don't think he's not that. But on the other hand, he doesn't worry about them. He doesn't worry about, if I'm going to tick you off, it doesn't really matter. This is what I want to do. This is how I see I need to get it done. I'm not afraid to state my case. And if you like me, you like me. And if you don't, you don't. And that's, you know, that is a little bit refreshing in politics because he's really pretty straightforward. He doesn't change much. He has changed some. He's made some buffoon comments and gone back.
I will say that piece of what you're saying I agree with about Trump is he really doesn't seem to care if you like him or you don't like him. I mean, I think he wants to be liked.
I think in private, yeah.
But yeah, I think in private he wants to be liked. But I think on this political stage, he's like, look, this is what it is from me.
Tough face.
And either you're going to get on board or you're going to get off.
Believe me.
And I think he knows that the base generally is going to get on board.
I would say two things real quick, and then I really do have to leave. But
Okay.
I would say, one, I disagree. I think he passionately cares if you dislike him based on the number of lawsuits he's filed against people who have said negative things against him.
You know what?
So he sues
Okay.
everybody and their dog who says anything defamatory about them.
You are
Yes.
right. You are right on that.
Yes.
But I think you have the same coalition on both sides. So the evangelical push was started under Ralph Reed when Ronald Reagan was running for president. And up to that point, there was no such thing as religious conservatives. Ralph Reed organized them into a movement. And since then, the Republican Party has been stuck with them, you know, and can't shake them. And that's a horrific thing. But I also say, look at the number of African Americans and minorities who literally vote Democrat no matter what, don't study any issues, and just go, no, I'm going to vote Democrat because Republicans don't seem to like them. Like, well, that's not a fair assessment of all the issues in the country. You're just voting, and the evangelicals do the same. They don't care. They would never vote. My mom would never vote Democrat to save her own life. She would rather just pull the plug on the Republican side or pull the lever, whatever you do, push the button or whatever.
I think the best example of what you're saying is Caitlyn Jenner had a tweet, I think it was last week or 2 weeks ago, where she said it was easier to come out as a transgendered woman than it was to come out as a transgendered woman who was Republican. Because within her own community, people were like, you know, it was like, how could you?
Yeah.
And it's just like, well, wait a minute, hold on, the two aren't. But in their mind, the two are.
It's the same
just
thing.
yeah.
My best friend D.W., who was a gay man,
Yeah.
says, I can understand why you won't vote for Hillary, but you can't vote for Trump. And I kind of, D.W., you know?
Yeah.
You know, this is, you just can't go out and throw everybody under the bus because they think something different. And I can understand your passion, and I love you to death as my best friend, but, you know, come on, man. You know, you have your place, I have my place, and you just can't trash everything. And that's part of the problem, I think, with the Republican Party, that is that there's a certain amount of media that no matter what, we're haters. We hate everybody, we hate everything, we want to pit everybody down, and we want to repress everybody, and we're not going to collect any taxes, and the country's going to turn into this depression area of Armageddon. And I just find that a little bit stunning. Really? Really?